Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and how good is it to have footy back? We'll get our first glimpse at the Marsh Series, whatever they're calling it, Marsh Community Series. We're going to finally get a bit of a look at some of those players we've been talking about for some time. Now, before the PC police pounce all over me, I'm not disrespecting the women's comp. I've watched a few bits and pieces, that sort of thing, but it does take time to develop a rapport and connection with those players. I've watched the Cats a little bit, a few highlights and that, but at this point, nothing beats seeing, particularly from a SuperCoach point of view, nothing beats getting these practice games underway, and we get the first chance at either validating what we've been thinking about some of these players, or perhaps going the other way and making us question those selections. Now, I'm just driving off to the shops, I might make a little slow cooker meal tonight, but I just thought it'd be good to run through a few of the games and just whet the appetite. You know, I've been trying to get lots of content out there. I've been aiming for one a day if I can, and sometimes it just helps to knock that video out in the car. So I think tonight's match is really interesting. We've got St Kilda and the Hawks, and I just want to sort of talk about a couple of players, just more so off the top of my head, that have probably guys I'm looking at selecting or something to think about, really eager to see what they produce. Bearing in mind I'm filming this on Tuesday, so I don't really know the availability of the players and exactly who's going to be put out onto the park, but nonetheless, let's take a look at a few names, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on who you're looking at and you got on your radar. But for the Hawks, there isn't a stack, to be honest. It'll be interesting to see where Wingard lines up and sort of what position he plays, but most of the interest is at the St Kilda Football Club. There is a range of names. You know, you got the youthful types in Jack Bytel, Max King, and then you've got the likes of, say, a Dan Hanbury, who's conducting a little bit of interest. You've got the next generation Hunter Clark types as well. You know, Jade Gresham, he's a guy I haven't spoken about much, but there's a lot of talk that he could really explode. There was a bit of that talk last year too. But it'd be very interesting to see if he can feature in the midfield a little bit. And then Dylan Robertson as well. He's a guy that a lot of people are fancying down back. I'm not quite on board with him, but if he starts racking them up off half back, then all of a sudden he'll give me something to think about. But definitely the Saints have quite a bit of interest. So there's a few names to just have a look at tonight. So, and then if we're taking a look at the Bulldogs and North Melbourne, I think if we start with North Melbourne, Aidan Bonner's a guy who's definitely, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, I'm not exactly sure, but he used to be at the Giants. He's come to North Melbourne for a bit of exposure at senior level. Obviously the Giants bat so deep, it was pretty tough to break into that side, but he's a big-bodied mid. He's a big unit and a good ball winner by all reports, and I think at 200 odd K, I reckon he's the sort of guy that we potentially might look at in our forward line more so, I'd say. And I'm pretty excited by that prospect. He's not in my team at the moment, but I think he's a definite chance to feature in many, and could just be a couple of good practice games away from cementing himself. Jai Simpkin, Curtis Taylor, a few interesting types to also think about. Paul Ahern, he's a fella that I reckon could really see a big spike in his numbers. I don't think I'll have the guts to pick him in the back line, but he found a bit of a role off half back as a distributor type late last year. Pretty nice ball user, and if the signs are that North Melbourne want the ball in his hands coming out of defence, then that's just gold for us in SuperCoach land. And look, I feel as if he isn't spoken about too much, so he could be a guy that maybe point a different style. I'm not sure of his ownership, to be honest, but certainly something to think about. Then we've got at the Dogs, Timmy English. If he's named and playing, which I'm sure he will be, I'll be all ears. I'll be watching very closely just to see how good he's looking, because the talk's been that he's been on fire in the pre-season. I'd be very interested to see what he actually backs up when it comes to playing against actual opposition. Josh Dunkley, he's a type that I've been seriously considering as well. Actually, I probably would have done my latest team perhaps last night by the time I schedule these videos. A little bit of a Josh Dunkley inclusion, so I'd be interested to get a bit of affirmation for that. And then, you know, there's also the likes of Caleb Daniel, who's in my side as well, and he's a guy that I'm always pretty interested in seeing how he goes. I'm really confident in his selection, but it's always nice to just get real confidence with them playing some good footy in the pre-season. Can Shorty nail the park? Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, fairly solid. Anyway, we've rocked up the shops and I've still got a few games to go. Let's turn this off. So, where was I? Yeah, that was pretty much all for that game. I'll probably miss a few names. I just jotted a couple down and a few sort of off the top of my head. So, by all means, let me know if there's anyone that you're sort of having a look at that you're really interested in. But I just thought, just a bit of a simple video just to really get a few names on the radar. Melbourne and Adelaide, you know, Oliver, Petrarca, more so Oliver. I don't think anyone's really going to pick Petrarca unless he really looks like getting midfield time. But I doubt that. I think they like him as that bigger body type and a bit of a presence in the air and on the ground, in the forward line, that is. Where Oliver, really interested to see how he goes. I mean, I really love him as a selection. I'm backing him to go about 112 plus, to be honest, is the number I've been floating around. Just be good to get a look at him. And at the Crows, there's going to be a lot of interest in terms of the young guys, you know, McAdam, McHenry, Duday, and there will be others too. Wilson is a guy I mentioned not too long ago. And I think there's going to be a real opportunity for development and cash cows in the Supercoach world at Adelaide. Rory Laird, I think, is a guy that a lot of people will just be looking for a little bit of assurance as well, just to make sure that he's playing that nice role. You know, Smith and Gibbs and other types, you know, Miller, how are they going to sort of affect him? Will he be back to his best? There'll be a few people out there wanting to see just how he goes as well. Gold Coast and the Cats, there's certainly a few sons that people will be looking at. You know, Matty Rowell, all eyes will be on him. All my eyes will be on Hugh Greenwood. You know, I've talked him right up all pre-season. Be very interested to see how he goes. Isaac Rankin, Lockie Weller as well. I think he's a guy that hasn't been talked about much at all. He's available as a defender. Made his name as a junior and was the main reason they brought him over from the Dockers was his ball-winning ability as a mid. Now, I don't think anyone's really going to select him, but if he does find himself through the midfield and winning a fair bit of ball, it could give us something to think about. He could be a little tempter. At the Cats, I think Jack Stephen will be a guy that we're looking at a lot, trying to see his position. You know, hopefully he is playing. Paddy Dangerfield, just be interested to get a look at Pat as well. You know, how much time is he spending forward? I don't think it'll change too much. I think it'd be predominantly mid, particularly with Tim Kelly out of the picture. And yeah, obviously, personally, I'll be just keen to see the Cats, all of them, just to get a bit of a gauge of how we're going through the pre-season. But they're just a couple of names you might want to have a look at for your fantasy team. And then we've got Brisbane and Port. And look, Port don't seem to have a stack of relevance. But I tell you what, everyone will be looking at Dan Houston. He's the man at the moment. He's the flavour of the month. His percentage of ownership is going through the roof, myself included. I'm on board. And I think we'll be looking to see those midfield minutes that we've heard so much about. Brisbane, you got Starcevic, you got Smith, a couple of young guys looking to break into the side. Not an easy team to break into, but I definitely think there are a couple of guys that could make a name for themselves. My man from the Brisbane Lions, Watto, has certainly talked up Smith. He thinks he's a really good chance to get into the side. And also spoke a little bit about Rayner, you know, a bit more midfield time, which I think we'll gradually see him develop into. But I doubt that we'd see him too much in the midfield rotation, given how strong Brisbane's mids are. But I think year upon year, that time that he spends in the midfield will only go up, given his fitness and more opportunity as he develops physically as well. And how will Birchall look? Be interesting to see him in the Brisbane colours. I think he'll tempt a few. He won't tempt me, but there'll definitely be a few that look at going for Grant. And Devon Robinson as well, another young guy that I didn't mention just before, but he's certainly a player who was the talk of the town, really, the big-bodied mid. You know, they reckon he's physically ready to go. Plenty of talk about him. But again, Brisbane are going to be a tough side to break into. So there's a few names. I'm sure I've missed a few as well, but I just smashed out a few names, put pen to paper, and just a few guys off the top of my head that I'm keen to have a look at because it's very exciting. Footy is really starting to get awfully close now. I can't wait. I was looking at the AFL fixture before, looking at round 1. It's not far off. I think I'm going to go to the Friday night game. Dogs and Collingwood, might get on the train for that one. Pretty keen. Yeah, it's the anticipation is always massive at this point in time. Obviously SuperCoach, but just footy in general. It's more in the paper, it's more in the radio, and after this weekend it'll just continue to grow. Absolute fever pitch by mid-March. People will be absolutely hanging out for it. I already am, but let me know how your team's shaping up. Obviously I'll recap these practice matches early next week. Potentially me and Langers will suss the availability, but definitely we'll cover off. These are the guys we're looking at, but we'll definitely cover off on the guys that made us take notice by the end of the weekend. So I look forward to doing that, and I'll chat to you soon. Cheers.